Awesome. Happy Friday. Happy February 16th. Welcome to MVP Office Hours. My name is Dale Ziegler. Along with me is best friend for life, Squire Kirshner. Say hi,
Hi,
Squire.
everybody.
And in spirit, we'll say hi to Joy. She is at a training and won't be able to join us today, but we do love her. We miss her, and she should be back on the next one. So say hi to Joy in spirit. First and third Friday of the month, you can find us on LinkedIn. We've moved all of our individual stuff over to LinkedIn. We still have the MVP Office Hours handles on Twitter X or X Twitter or whatever it's called now. I don't know. Anyway, that's still out in the Twitterverse. MVPofficehours.info is our core site to be able to register. And you can email us at this Gmail right here, but you'll get an out of office reply that says, hey, why don't you go post your question in this group where more than just myself, Squire, and Joy can answer it. Let everybody have the opportunity to answer it. So if you are not following the MVP Office Hours group on the Trailblazer Success Community, go do that now. Please. I want to be polite, please. So welcome if this is your first time. Welcome if it's your more than first time. We'd love having everybody. Our normal cadence is first and third Friday of the month. Our next meeting will be in 2 weeks on March 1st. And as I said earlier, March is a 5 Friday month, so we're going to have a 3-week gap in there somewhere. But normally it is first and third Friday of the month. Open Q&A about anything Salesforce, platform adjacent, event adjacent, whatever. As long as it deals with Salesforce, you're in the right place to ask questions. You can register anytime at that bit.ly. It is case sensitive. You can catch recordings on our YouTube channel with links to YouTube from the community and from Twitter. And if you post about us, we'd love for you to just use any of our favorite hashtags there. Anyone and everyone can participate. We've had MVPs ask questions. We've had people who aren't yet officially recognized by Salesforce as MVPs answer those questions. In the end, we are all MVPs. We're all here to help each other. We're all here to learn from each other. And that's what we as humans were meant to do, is to just help each other. So if you're helping, you're an MVP. We also have the chat capabilities in Zoom for you to share links and other resources as well as answers. Raise your hand to get in line to ask a question. If there's dead air, speak up and ask your question, whatever. But we're using Zoom's capabilities on chat to be able to share those kinds of things. And then we will also post those in this deck that will be shared with the recording sometime this weekend. You can also screen share, but a few rules on that. Do not share production. Please, 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 please. If we can at all help it, don't share production. We are recording this. And so, if you're not comfortable being recorded, you're not allowed to be recorded, please drop. We will share the recording will be on our YouTube channel tonight, tomorrow, sometime this weekend, along with sharing out the deck. But along with sharing your screen, because we're recording, you don't want your company's production data, client production data, anything like that to show. Show us a dev org, show us a playground, show us a sandbox, just anything but a production org if we can at all help it. And also, let's have fun, but let's be professional. Let's be positive. Let's not bash Salesforce. Let's not throw employees under the bus. Let's not throw our own companies under the bus. This is recorded, and the last thing you want, especially with as exponentially robust as search capabilities are becoming, the last thing you want is something that you said on our fun little Friday afternoon call to come back and bite you in the butt and get you terminated from your job, because this is not a place to rant about people, about the companies. And so let's keep it fun. Let's keep it positive. Let's keep it professional. Let's keep it fun, though. Upcoming events on the community side of things, so things that are not sponsored by Salesforce, but absolutely have the community and learning and networking at their core. GPT Dreaming coming up, well, what is that, next week? Snowforce next week as well. That's one of the more long-standing traditional ones out in Salt Lake City. We Dreamin', what is We Dreamin', Squire, do you know?
I was trying to figure that out myself. I know we had a reference to it in a previous call. Let me see if I can find the link and give you more details.
Awesome.
I
Thank
know
you.
it's a Dallas local group, but I'm not entirely sure. So let me get back to you.
Yeah,
I
no
don't know
worries.
anything about We Dreaming, but just Snowforce. I think Snowforce actually didn't they have a break for a while, and they're back now and
Mm,
back better than ever. I think Snowforce was one of those places where everyone just had a heck of a lot of fun. And so if you have a chance to go to Snowforce, I know it's like February 21st, so it's coming up. But I remember everyone saying how much fun that they had at Snowforce. So props to them.
absolutely. Well, and Stu saying so much fun. If you're new to office hours, if you're new to Salesforce, if you're new to any of it, the community events are phenomenal because they're much smaller than an event like Dreamforce. They're also a lot more affordable. They're a lot more intimate. You can meet really closely some amazing people at these events at pennies on the dollar compared to maybe what Dreamforce would be. Dreamforce, of course, and TDX sponsored by Salesforce is going to throw out all the bells and whistles and everything, but we know budgets are a thing. We know travel restrictions might be a thing, whatever. So if you have a chance to go to a community event, maybe you're more introverted and don't want to go to a big Salesforce event. The community events are absolutely awesome. They are thrown by members of the community who just want to give back. Again, if you're out there to help, you're an MVP. That's exactly what those events were born to do. So definitely look into them. And then at a local level, if you're not connected with your local user group, and I do see a handful of user group leaders on the call right now, especially right here in Kansas City. Hey, Matt, how you doing? Go check out the featured groups link there and find your local group and go have coffee, go have pizza, have a drink, whatever, and meet those people that are in the same area as you. And it doesn't all have to be through a screen. Like you can do it in person as well. So look into those. So the ooey gooey delicious stuff, the actual questions. We've had a handful of questions come in through the success community group. I'm not looking at the participant window. Do we have Leanne on?
So I couldn't quite tell if Leanne and Ben, if they were just copying MVP office hours, or if they were asking MVP office hours. So the links should be active, but I didn't see either of them on the call as of yet. And I know,
Gotcha. Still
I
good to go
believe
through
Katie
here.
was planning to join later in the call if she's able, so we might be able to jump right to Stu.
Okay, so tell you what, let's run through these quickly because they might actually be easy enough. I do want to give that since we're
Yep.
recording as well. Two competing flows causing unable to lock row error, round robin custom setting records, and the potential Apex class fix alluded to by support would be appreciated. You don't need to create multiple posts for the same question. Okay, so
yeah,
no, don't delete it. That's how it showed up in our group. We might be able to help. Don't delete. Is this potentially our old friend, the order of execution? This is the broader question.
Yeah, perhaps. And I'm just I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but in our own development, our own company, we've been talking about trigger-based frameworks for Apex code. And one question that came up is, can you also use trigger frameworks for Flow? And the answer to that is, well, you could build that, but another way to do it around is set up your flows so that you have a master flow per object. Like the rule is, and you can correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but not to have multiple automations per object, or not to, like, don't have flows and process builders and workflows and triggers all running at the same time per account object or contact object. That may cause record locks. And And so one way to think about doing that is to have a master flow that then in turn calls subflows that will do those actions that you need it to do. And I know in a lot of business scenarios, you're like, well, I can't do that, Stuart. That won't work in my business scenario. You're right. It won't work in every single scenario. But you need to, sometimes you just need to sit down with a whiteboard or a piece of paper and think out those flows of where are the logic problems that you're going to hit the same record on the same object.
Like what you're saying, Stuart, and it's part of Katie's question was something similar. So if she's on, we might circle right back to that conversation. I will offer that I think most admins struggle more than anything with like feeling that what you just described is a rule without understanding why that is a guideline, right? So going one step further, it's not about having flows and processes and workflows and triggers and everything on a single object. It's if you aren't able to do that second part of your description of mapping it out and understanding what's causing triggers, the best way to ensure they don't step on each other is to make one master all. But you might have, like you just said, reasons to have multiples of each on all of them, but understand where they're like take the time to understand where they interact so you don't get those faults. Is that a fair assessment? Right, like if you, I mean, I'll say the dumbest thing ever. If I have two on create triggers, I should know why they're not one, not just assume they should be one, right?
Yep. A business process map or some sort of explanation that you can go back to your team and say, here's why we build it this way.
Yep.
Yep.
And then the next step is exactly what you described. Then you're like, I need two unique on create events. How do I make sure they don't fight with each other? And then you take the next step and you, like you're describing, like a flow with outcomes, or maybe you have to reevaluate the entry criteria, or maybe you have like, there's lots of then and thens. I think too often people just assume like, I just got to have one for everything and that's going to fix my problems. And sometimes it's worse. You don't get record locks, but what you do get is an unmaintainable cluster of nodes and question marks, right?
It becomes way too monolithic of a thing.
Yep. And until they give us a documentation node in Flow, it's even harder because then there's a little bit of tribal knowledge and a lot of paperwork and a lot of Elements Cloud documents to try to figure out what it's all trying to do when the smoke clears.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with everything you said, Stu.
Nice. I like that. And I will post the recording to this on her original post, just in case this one gets deleted per Tom's direction. All right, visibility based on formula referencing a quick choice. Ooh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, and Eric jumped right in and explained the answer, but I thought it was really valuable, so that's why I included it.
All right, so the high level summary of the question, flow screen where I want to make a section only visible if the quick choice value does not start with a string. Other fields react to the values chosen, not the visibility. We get into some of the syntax there. Formula remains visible no matter what I do. I can create a checkbox field on the screen, set it to the formula's value, set it visibility based on checkbox field. However, then I have an extra field on the screen and making it not visible renders it useless. Any ideas? Oh, even tagged solo admins. Love it. So to Eric's answer, reactive formulas do not apply to visibility on a flow screen. To get around this, I've created a reactive screen component whose output can be used for conditional visibility. Pass your formula in as an input. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of cool toys in Salesforce, and the toy box just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I love that everybody dives all in on it. But then sometimes we dive into the wrong part of the toy box. We don't need to go here. We actually need to go here to then end up here. Know what each thing learn and know what each thing in Salesforce does and was intended to do, because it might take you down the path that you actually need to go down, not what you thought you needed to go down. especially when you start getting into conditional fill in the blank. So
For the double, I think Ben just joined.
really,
Oh no, wrong
No,
Ben.
different
My
Ben.
bad. Wrong Ben.
no, he might not.
Yeah.
Nobody is the wrong Ben. He's just a different Ben.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen formulas be the bane of most of admin's existence for a lot of reasons, not just this. I think formulas are always going to be one of those two-headed giants of like they do a thing, but they don't do everything. So, you know, like I don't know if anybody's ever tried to have a DLRS trigger on a formula recalc, and it's like that's not how it works. It feels like that's how it should work.
Yeah.
It's not how it works.
Well, let's go back about 10, 15 years where, at least in the admin universe, formulas were all we really had to get most of what we hoped we could get done. I mean, everything we have today, not much of it existed back then. But then formulas became so entrenched or never gone back, revisited, and refactored that now they're causing problems. Or misassumptions have led to this is why the formula is or isn't working. But I will chalk it up to it's been so entrenched from many, many, many years ago that they're hard to undo, or it's hard to find time to go undo or whatever. But in the end, what we find is we have a formula trying to trigger something. And I'll go back to my earlier point that it's also know what each thing in Salesforce was intended to do, because there's probably some other piece of functionality that actually does do the thing you're trying to get this formula to do.
I recently saw Steve Moe. Steve Moe is so amazing. He boggles my mind because I'm seeing this formula is Boolean, but then starts with this begins and then part of the formula. He was showing at Cactus Force. I saw the video of this. He did a if then formula. Was trying to do a validation rule and then was coming up with errors. And then said, well, what if we change this into a case formula? And then showed that, and he said, I was still running into problems. And they changed it all, and he said, wait a second, just go back to basics here. I remember that this particular thing that we're trying to do is just figure out what is the greatest number. And the number was on the end of this string. So he's like, what if we just converted this string or this pick list into a string and then convert that string into a value? And then his formula just turned out to be just this one tiny line of thing instead of this entire huge formula. I'm like, oh, Steve, I wish I could get into your mind and figure out how did you figure that out? But sometimes it's like we struggle with these hard things and then realize, oh, it's actually a really easy formula. That I love Eric Smith's answer here of let me create a component that you can put into your active screen. Or maybe there's a Steve Moe answer where what if I created a formula on the object that did a calculation for me even before all this happens, that I can get around all of this altogether?
I feel like it might have been Steve, but years ago someone made a comment to me that, especially with a validation, because they work in negatives, of course. Regardless of what you've written for the formula, try to write a one-sentence summary of what it's trying to do. Because when you do that, you end up having to shortcut the logic into bite-sized pieces, which might do exactly what you described, you know, of like, I just want the last 3 characters of this string and then see if it's the max number. Oh crap. That's all I had to do this whole time. I didn't have to write ifs and cases and thens and is pick vals and check for nulls. Like that's all I had to do. I mean, that's genius at work, right?
And all using very small microcosmic tools that were meant to do one very specific thing, but they get to shine in that scenario and do exactly what they were meant to do. Cool. All right. Katie, I believe, just joined.
She did. Perfect timing.
Yeah.
So Stu, everything you said 10 minutes ago, you have to reiterate for Katie.
Sorry, Stu, but I'd love to hear it again.
I bet that somebody could actually reiterate it in a much more concise way.
Not at all. Give it to us, buddy. So I tell you what, Katie, why don't you lead the question a little bit? Give Stu a chance to process everything we just got done talking about. So
Okay.
walk us
So-
through where you're at.
Just like last week or last time, my company's trying to reintroduce more flows and start off on the good foot by organizing them on the right manner to build effectively. And I talked them out of the one flow per object idea and because of Flow Trigger Explorer. But they do want to stick with one flow for fast field updates for the before saved flows. And then I had a slew of questions of, should we do that? First of all, also, if we did that, would we have one flow for like entry criteria being created? And then another flow for updated, and then another one for created and updated. And then if you still do it with one flow, do you do one big decision element, or you do one decision element and move on to the next one? And how visible is that of all the fields that you're managing in that flow? Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. I would want to do a one-off, but however, as you grow the org, I can see how it can get out of control with so many fast field updates. So they're looking for ideas. They're wanting to start merging stuff, and I want to make sure I research this enough or get enough experience from you guys to tell me what I should do.
Yeah, how would I go about this? I mean, it feels like the choose your own adventure book when you were in school and they'd say you could start here. Do you go left or right? But I think you need to map that out in a way of let me try and diagram this out of if we did all of our update. Well, let's see what we start out. Great. If we did all of our fast field updates for one object, I'd have questions like, is the number of them manageable? Are we doing them based on business process? Are we doing them based on number of fields? Like how much of a Hydra are we going to be building here?
Well, and I guess, doesn't it also beg the question that every object serves a different purpose? So aren't there potentially multiple answers?
Yeah.
Well, my architect, he just said, we should try to strive to have one flow per object, something called object name before insert update field updates. And we do all of the automated field value settings for that object.
Perhaps, but I've also
Yeah.
seen that. I've also seen orgs where they do that, and then it becomes a nightmare to maintain. Unless you've got a way of doing it in branched out subflows. Like we're going to have one main flow, and then we've set up the logic so that if we need to branch it out for a subflow because of business reasons, this subflow is going to do this business reason. That subflow is going to do that business reason. But it all comes back to the main flow. I get that, but the logic has to be documented first. It has to be architected before you just start puking it out into a flow. I'd have the same conversation with my main lead engineer as far as coding. If you're going to be creating a new trigger, are you just dumping it all into one trigger? Or are you going to have a trigger framework that says, well, if you're doing this, then you're going to call that utility. Or if you're doing that, you're going to call that utility. I think we have to think of flows the same way.
Yeah.
Andy
mean-
Yudkin, I'm never sure how to pronounce his name. I'm so sorry, Andy. He also talked about if you're going into that flow and you're having to do a different decision element, and underneath that you have lots of different steps, that you're running unnecessary things. So if you do that main decision element as your criteria, your entry criteria, then you're running less and therefore putting less strain on your system. I mean, it's a fast field, so it's not as much strain as like, you know, a related, but that kind of, it changed the way I was looking at things, because I was trying to like have this whole thing and I'm like, all right, you know, I scrapped that. And then I'm like, for my opportunities, I started making them per stage and per like main thing that happened. And that's helped us at least manage it a little bit better. But yeah, when he's like, I'm not doing the one flow anymore, I'm using my criteria, that it made a lot of sense. And that's kind of where I started up with that. But
And
that
I think-
single trigger is such a pain when you have to fix something.
And I think that is huge, to the point of not every object is the same, especially something like opportunity, case, lead, that have a life cycle. If you've evaluated the business requirements, the process requirements, and all of that, to determine that the sustainable balance is, yeah, we need more than one, either more than one entry point or more than one flow, whatever. You've evaluated that, you've determined that, because that's what's sustainable and scalable for your use case, and that's okay. Whereas something like an account that is probably largely static, it doesn't have a life cycle necessarily. I mean, I guess it depends on how you're using it, but or pick any custom object record. Those are largely, they're going to exist for life, and it just is. You can treat those differently than a life cycle type of object.
Mm.
I think I'd like to have some more understanding too, like when an architect, even me, which I'll just side note, one of my goals for 2024 is focusing on why the decision, not what the decision is. So I would love to have that architect explain to you what they're trying to accomplish by making a statement of one flow per trigger, because I think if you start to tear that down, and he or she starts to say things like, well, we want to prevent risk, don't want to overload the system, we don't like, you can start to address those things and say like, well, we don't have to worry about overload, because if we have good entry criteria, they don't all fire. We'll only fire the ones we want to. Or we want to have a single point of maintenance. Well, now you've built yourself a monolithic roadmap. And even though you're really thinking about a single use case, when the next one comes, it's got to fit that model that you've decided. How do I leverage the tooling that's available to me as an admin to achieve the architectural intent that you're describing, but you're telling me I have constraints, when the constraints are the platform, not your decision, right? Like I think you start to break that down. Plus, it turns into a good conversation to learn, both that person and you can like teach each other stuff that maybe they don't know. So
Well, he
Is this-
wrote, he doesn't want to do one flow for every separate thing. Same with Apex triggers. There will be performance costs for each incremental flow that system has to run through. So combining all the field values setting into one flow is going to be faster, if only by a little bit, was his consideration.
Okay.
But if you're going through all those decision nodes, is it faster?
well, you're not going through all of them though, right? Like, so when you have entry criteria, as soon as it fails, right? You aren't having, there's no overhead, right? It's
Well-
just like a trigger context, right?
Maybe I'm confused then, because of the fast field update, you have the entry criteria is going to be different for each update.
Potentially.
So so technically you'd set up, if you're going to put all your fast fields on one flow, the entry criteria would be nothing.
Right.
So it can capture all of them, right?
It's
And
just
then-
schools of thought. And my last role, we had that situation where we had like opportunity, for example, before save or fast field, and it was just like, and it becomes very monolithic. And we definitely got, I think we started to migrate to more specific entry criteria. So yeah, like Squire was saying, it doesn't meet A, B, and C, doesn't even run, versus the monolithic, is this true? Okay, do the thing, and then the next and the next and the next and the next. So I think there's just different.
The
I don't
process.
think there's a right answer. I don't know. There's conversations and arguments for each school of thought.
That's how Process Builder used to work, though. If it doesn't hit this, then it'd go to the next one.
Well, but you could have had the same conversation about process builder too. You could add a process for every flow and then just had an exit criteria, but you didn't have the customization of multiple processes, because processes worked differently too. The engine was different, right? So don't confuse decisions with entry criteria. I think that's the other piece of this, right? So I'm going to use something that Stu said earlier. So if you were going to write a trigger for every change, you could, in fact, you can even do the fast update within the trigger body. You'd never do that. Instead, you'd have a on update, go to a class, the helper class would decide which methods to run, and you're like start to segregate that piece out. So you're not running every method in every class to see if you need to do something. You steer it. That's what this new flow modeling does, is you basically have entry criteria to say, which one of these flows should I care about? It doesn't run all of them. It only tries to run all of them that you built. And now you have the ability to parse it out and say, like going back to like as an architect, why do we have 15 fast field update flows? That's a really good question. Let's refactor and determine where we can merge them. Or they have to be independent. Here's where we get savings. But if you just have one, the only conversation is yes or no, not how can we make it better?
I think I am getting my entry criteria and my decision wrong, because I just can't get past the idea of no entry criteria and then it deciding which one to run.
And I think that's where you get the monolith, is if the entry criteria is something changed, period. And now you have to deal with hundreds of decisions.
Yeah.
That's what you don't want to do.
That's the only way that I see it being built in my mind. I don't
Yeah.
know how else to do it, though.
Yeah. So I think I think the use case, if we knew more about the use case, and if we whiteboarded, Stuart was just commenting about having some sort of like diagram. I think it helps you, because at the bare minimum, even if you whiteboarded out a monolith, what you might then find is you could say something like, you see node one is an entry criteria. Let's move that up one node earlier in this flow. And now we know that what we really need is 2 fast field update flows. One that meets A and B and one meets C and D. You've already created a level of scalability that you didn't realize you had when you were looking at the big picture. And I think the use case would help you.
Mm.
I saw Mike's flash on and off a dozen times while I tried once again dominated this conversation. Does anybody want to add something?
Yeah, one thing I'll say, I've run into when dealing with the monolithic flows is like, if you have something like CPQ or some package that like is running a lot of other things, with the monolithic flows, you're going to run into a lot of timeouts eventually, especially if we're talking about the opportunity or some of those other heavily used objects. So I don't know if CPQ is your use case, but just thinking about what is installed in the org that isn't a flow or a trigger that like could also be causing timeouts or be a potential issue in the future.
So there is a way to build it all on one flow that's not monolithic. Am I understanding that right?
How about if we agree that monolithic is the result of a flow, not an intent? And so, yes, you could build it all in one, and it might actually not be bad depending on your use case. But you've set an anchor that is now the point of reference for everything else you build for the next couple of years, that you either have to continue to add to, or you now have tech debt and refactoring requirements.
Yeah.
I see Stuart nodding. Well, I hope that sounded good.
I need help with that.
Yeah.
Oh, you help me.
Yeah,
with
I mean, yeah, you're gonna have tech debt either way, but I'm just the future you know, 3 years down the road, if you build that thing that has all the decisions inside of the flow, and then business changes. You have a reorg and your business stuff says, well, actually, we don't want it to work that way. I don't know the answer to this question, but is it easier to then change 24 separate flows with different entry criteria, or one giant flow that has 24 decision points? I don't know. That's
I
up to,
really think it's case by case. Like
Yeah.
you really got to scrutinize and determine there's a balance in there. There is no one right answer to rule them all. It's case by case.
When you create a flow with separate entry criteria, do you guys mean that's when you're pulling in your subflows into the one flow? No, I'm not
No, it's
understanding what that looks like.
no,
Granted,
it's
mind you,
just,
my flow experience is
so think it. Let's simplify this a little bit. Let's go back to workflow rules. You had if A, B, or C, then send email alert, update field, whatever. It's that entry criteria of when am I actually trying to do the things, plain and simple.
Yeah.
If I meet these conditions and have to do stuff, that is your entry criteria. It's bringing that up front so that it's just a blip to evaluate if A and B or C. That's a blip compared to getting into a flow that's then having to measure the whole thing to determine have I hit A and B or C. If it's just right here that nope, okay, next, okay, found the one that I need. It's going to be so much less overhead if the entry criteria is more external to then determine this is the flow I need to run.
which is what field updates usually are. Field updates are usually like some trigger happened, so either a field changed or somebody did something, and we need that another field to be updated, or and so normally, at least in my orgs, that's when field updates happen. And so you can either say, I want every field update to have its own entry trigger, and so I'll build a flow for them, or one long one. If I've got 25 fields in my objects, I'm gonna have 25 different decision points that I have to maintain in that flow. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you that it's wrong or right. Either way, but you have to have it documented and inventoried to say this is how we've set up our structure, and we know it, and we know it's not going to bump into each other. Like each flow is unique and separate, and it's not going to lock records when it runs.
I think I'm getting confused when you guys say you can have one flow with separate entry criteria, because when I think of flows, you've got that one page, that first block where you pick your object, and that's where your entry criteria is.
No, okay, I think that's let's fix that right now. Dale, could I share really quick, please?
That's probably why I'm getting such a block on.
Yeah, no, I as you were saying what you were saying, I was like, oh, I bet you there's a something we could lean into here. Is this too small to see?
No, I can see that.
Okay, so this is what you're talking about, right? Like, pick your object, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is your criteria.
Yeah.
And so if you don't do anything else, if you just say, when created, do some stuff, you have actually no entry criteria. Your entry criteria is checking as if it's update or delete or whatever. But what we're saying is your first thing is to say, did name change, right? And then if it didn't, it stops. It doesn't go any farther.
Yeah.
Versus with decision nodes, you're saying, was it created? Now check and see if X is true, and then check if Y is true, and you start to branch out. By having this starting entry criteria, you don't go any farther if it doesn't meet it, and you don't have any overhead.
Exactly.
So that's the difference between the criteria and the nodes.
Exactly. So he wants to have just one flow with no entry criteria and all the decisions.
Yep.
And I'm kind of against that. I think it should just all be different flows with different entry criteria.
With the exception of sometimes it's okay to have a flow that has decisions in it if it makes sense from a sustainability and a scalability perspective. It's not one or the other, which is what Dale was saying.
Okay. Okay.
And I think also, like, I'm guilty of it too. Like, there's no magic number either. So like I've said multiple times today, like when you have dozens of criteria, and Stu said, when there's 24 criteria, I don't care if there's 3 criteria. You should still decide if there should be 3 or 1 based on well-architected principles, not because of a number.
Yeah, and you need to go peel that onion a little bit deeper, because now I'm thinking there's 24 criteria, but there might be 24 more criteria once you've created this one. So you put your entry conditions in here, but what are the decisions that you're making now inside of this flow? And inside of those decision criteria, you might have yet another layer of that onion to say, oh, but only when it's raining on Tuesdays do we actually update that field. So yes, I think having one, so I lean towards I have an opinion. I would lean towards I get scared on monolithics, because you could go so deep into it that unless you have it documented and you've got the whole team educated on here's how our flow works, which you should anyway, please meet as a team and educate each other on how your flows work. You could get lost.
When do you all publish your videos so that I could just be like, turn in this video and be like, start at this time for this?
So no pressure. I'll try to have it published by 3 Central. I'll try.
Thanks. So
This
there's
weekend. It'll be out this weekend.
Sure.
You don't have to throw them under the bus, but do we know your architect?
What?
Do
Yeah,
we do.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe Stu and I should have a meeting with your architect.
maybe. I don't know. He's a Hall of Famer. He's been around for quite a long time.
All
He's
right.
He's letting me take the flow, not the flow lead per se, but he's definitely opening up to more flow and wants to be part of flow. Like I said in our last call, like we have a very old org that flow couldn't handle back in the day, right? So now we're trying to make the right decisions moving forward, especially now that you have somebody that does do a little bit of flow. I dabble.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna throw one more thing out there.
Yeah.
There is no right decision, ever. There's always a good decision.
I was gonna say there's always hindsight.
Yeah, yes. Nothing is permanent. Everything is about a conversation, and everything can be changed. It's just making a good decision with intent and then moving forward. And I'm sure that's what your architect is doing too. He's got an intention of, if we do it this way, we'll get this success. And your challenge will be to say, well, what about this? And then you come to an agreement and move forward.
Ben makes a really good point in the chat that I wanted to also mention, which is, so I work at an enterprise organization that has multiple development teams, and they're working really hard at doing packaging. And so if you're going to do packaging, you also might want to not do monolithic flows, because every team might have their own flows that they want to be deploying in their packages. And so they're going to be creating their own flows with their own entry criteria and their own this and that. And it might be really difficult, Ben says, to coordinate changes, to not step on each other's toes. If you've got one huge flow and you want to separate your, like have a service team and a sales team and an ops team, how are those teams going to all write into the same flow? Or that's hard, but it can be done. Again, there's nothing that is impossible, but maybe having separate flows for individual teams that they can package themselves, it might be a little bit easier. I don't know. Again, it's up to the architect and the team to kind of decide.
Yeah. Thanks. I just wanted to get your all's opinion. That's all I had.
All right. Will we see you at TDX in a couple weeks?
Yes, I will
All right,
be there.
let's grab some coffee and talk more about this. I'd love to hear where you end up.
I'll be with my architect, so maybe we can
Cool.
revisit there,
Yeah.
have a chat.
I don't think I saw anything else come to the chat, and I think we hit all the comments. So the door is open for anybody who wants to ask questions, or
has
if
a
we want to keep
question, I
talking to
thought.
Katie, we can.
Yeah, I have a question. Can I share my screen?
Oh, Stuart, we skipped right over you. I'm sorry. Yes, sorry.
That's fine. I wanted to be last anyway. It was just if you wanted to have time and if anyone wanted to deal with my screen flow. I don't know, can you see my screen flow? Is that
Yep.
this is my Midwest Dreamin' practice site, the North Shore. I kept it and I'm still working on it. So this is my, how do I get rid of this thing? Okay, thank you. This is North Shore Railroad in Minnesota, Duluth Harbor, and I can do train tickets here, and I'm using the reactive screen flow. So as I choose my excursion, they have elegant dinner train that allows me to choose my elegant dinner and an alcohol, like my alcohol. Yep. And then I could choose a child ticket. And if I choose a child ticket, the alcohol choice goes away because kids don't drink alcohol. So that's nice, reactive screen there. And also, if I choose a child ticket, the train cost goes down by $5 because children they're not have that much of an income. As I choose, like you get a guidebook and then the guidebook goes up and all these reactive numbers go up based on my choices up here. It's really cool. Okay. The problem I'm having is that the elegant dinner train meal options do not include barbecued chicken and barbecue ribs or the beef short ribs. They should only include the butter sauce, vegan and gluten-free, or the pork loin with Dijon shallot reduction sauce. And when I go to the summer barbecue tasting train, then that one should include the barbecue chicken, barbecue ribs, or the braised beef. So I don't know in my flow, is there a way inside a reactive screen to tell the meal option pick list? I can set the component visibility to show this if the excursion choice has been chose, but can I choose just the pick list items to show based on the choice of the excursion? I don't know, throwing that out there to say I'm kind of stuck. Like sort of a dependent pick list, but not really. I want to force it to be a dependent pick list, and I haven't found a way in reactive screens to force that to happen. That's one of
Yep.
my problems.
Yeah, pick list choice sets, you cannot filter the list, so.
Cannot filter the list. Okay, then I got a problem there. And then the next one is, the next question I have is, when I go ahead and choose, then I get the last screen I have is an unhandled, oh, jeez Louise. You're killing me,
Okay.
Flo. Let's try this again. Day out with Thomas. I'm gonna get some pizza. It's a child ticket because the Thomas train is really cool for kids. All right, so success, your ticket has been reserved. I know this is really tiny. And then I can get my rail ticket here. And then I want to add another passenger. So I got a checkbox that add another passenger. What that does here is if I've got that check, add another passenger, goes back to the rail ticket order screen. What I really want to do is have that same choice. Like I'm adding another ticket. It should know that my excursion is Day Out with Thomas and the date is the same. I want to keep all that stuff from the last ticket, but it loses all that stuff. So I don't know if there's a way, there's nothing in this decision to say, when you're passing this, also pass all of the information from that other screen onto this screen. Like this decision element doesn't let me move it back. And that sucks.
I just put in the chat, but I haven't used it yet because obviously it's brand new. But what about with the repeaters where you could add, can you potentially?
No,
add multiple?
I've tried the repeater, but the repeater doesn't, it doesn't follow these like It doesn't let you do all that stuff inside the
Right.
repeater. The repeater just says, oh,
Who?
add another child ticket. Like you can put sections in a repeater, but you can't do this whole
You can't get fancy with it,
thing.
what you're saying.
Yeah, you
Couldn't
can't
you-
do this
couldn't
whole
you-
thing inside the repeater.
Couldn't you, in theory, create variables that are the default value choice for each of those different fields? And then after your first one, have an assignment to assign to those variables so that when you go back to the screen, those variables are populated with the
Mm.
prior value.
Yeah,
Yep.
I like
Yep.
what you're saying there. So
Have a little
create
assignment
create
note in
a
there.
create a new variable that's like default value variable, and it's going to be blank at first when I come through, but the first time that I put it in there, then
I
set
had an assignment element later
set
to set it.
something in there. Okay.
And then for
Mm.
the, I mean, I know you really can't do the choice thing for your second pick list, but what if you were to instead have two options for that, two different pick lists,
Oh,
and use the reactivity to figure out which one you're gonna display?
so meal option 1, meal option 2, and I only show meal option 1 if it's a barbecue train, meal option 2 if it's the elegant dinner train. Yeah, that could work.
The only downside is that it's not reactive to the actual data structure. You'd have to modify the flow every time new meals and combinations get added. Or if you have a dozen combinations, you have a dozen.
Right.
This is
So
really
I mean,
good,
scale,
but yeah.
scale becomes an issue, but.
Yep.
Okay, I can play with that. Yeah, I like it and then I hate it at the same time because it doesn't make it an easy fix.
Nope.
Okay, well, that was my,
Do we know
I'm-
if dependent pick list is coming and would eventually work with the
So-
reactive?
so flows do have dependent pick lists. But they don't work like regular dependent pick lists. They're different and strange, and they scare me a little bit. So I need to dive a little bit deeper into that and figure that out.
What about something like a decision, like a table component and a custom metadata table that has the combination of. So going back to my question about the having to track, but modify the flow. What if you had somebody who's like, oh, you've picked this type of thing. Here are your meal choices in like a decision table that looks at metadata. Now you can add, move, remove, modify whatever combinations you need.
Interesting. Okay.
It would be a little bit more of a kludgy user interface, but on the other hand, you also might be able to display more than just a single pick list. You could have calories and whatever else might be valuable to
Oh.
the meal as well as
Yeah,
as
yeah.
columns to this choice.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing that I'm gonna try and add to here is there is a loyalty program that if you've purchased a ticket before, it'll look at your contact record and say, is Squire a previous passenger? Then give him a 10% discount on this ticket.
Right.
I haven't quite figured that out yet, but I know it's totally possible because Midwest Streaming did it for its sponsors. So I just got to figure out how to make that kind of formula. But it's so cool. Reactive flow, I'm loving it. The more I get to play with it, the more I'm thinking this is the future. So thank you for giving me some ideas. I will continue to play with it and let you know if I find some more cool things.
The neat looking flow. I love seeing branding too. I don't get to see branding very often in a flow screen or even on an object. So, right. So many of us are stuck with default values because there's no time to think about branding your app.
That, and then maybe next year exposing it on a community site or a portal, and then just letting the passenger decide which train they want to take and how many tickets and whatever.
Very cool. Very cool. Thanks, dude. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
30 seconds left. Is that it? Did we flummox everybody? Well, I'll just throw it out there. Thanks. It was great to see all of you, and all of your input was super valuable. I mean, other than to great to have you come off mute and teach us something, because that's awesome. Katie too, Ben as well, he left, but it's great to have all you here, so thank you. Anything else to offer, Dale, other than good luck to everyone this weekend? No.
Good luck to everyone this weekend.
I will offer, Joy has set up a architect off with Mike and I after my passing comment last week. We're gonna have a really good conversation about our two strategies. I think we're gonna try to record it and make it public and just turn it into a good conversation about why certain decisions are being made. Hopefully it'll be valuable to someone when the smoke clears. So,
Get your tickets now. We'll sell you the whole seat, but you'll only need the edge.
ding ding. So,
Mhm.
all right. Thanks everybody. Have a good afternoon and a great weekend, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.